Hi, my name is Bibek Adhikari. I am an English instructor. In today's class, we are going to solve the reading portion of Unit 9, that is moral stories. So, let's begin. Alright, we are now going to start the reading portion of Unit 9, which is called Moral Stories. The story we have today is The Foolish Sage and the Jackal. The Foolish Sage and the Jackal. First of all, I want to ask you some questions. Do you like reading stories? What types of stories have your grandparents and parents been telling you? So those two questions, let's think about them. Alright, let's think about these two questions. This is something called pre-reading activity. Before reading we do something. We ask ourselves some questions, and the two questions are going to be, do you like reading stories? And another question is, what kind of short stories have your parents and grandparents been telling you? Right? Obviously, you may like, most of the time you may like reading stories, or other times you may not like reading stories. So that depends. Another thing is, maybe your grandparents, or maybe your parents, or maybe your elder sister or elder brother, they all have been telling you, different kind of stories. Maybe they are doing that. I don't know. So this is something on pre-reading activity. Think about it. Try to answer these two questions. Just verbally, try to answer these two questions right now. Now, if you're done answering these two questions, let's go and study the text. Here's the text. The Foolish Sage and the Jackal. In a monastery far away from human habitation lived a saint called Deva. He made a lot of money by selling clothes gifted to him by well-wishers and disciples. It became a burden for him to guard that wealth. Since he did not trust anyone, he put all his money into a bag and carried it with him wherever he went. Asambhav, an experienced cheat, noticed Deva always carrying his bag with him. He thought that the bag certainly contained something valuable, so he planned to snatch it from him. One day the cheat met the saint and promptly fell on his feet and said, "Oh, know all. I have realized that this life is an illusion. Youth is fleeting, and all the familial ties are like a dream. Please show me the correct path that frees me from all the worldly ties." Pleased with his humility, Deva said, "Child, you are the blessed one who has thought of renouncing worldly pleasures. Listen, the person that chants Om Namah Shivaya and smears holy ash on his forehead becomes Shiva himself. He knows no rebirth. I shall accept you as my portage. But you must not enter the hermitage in the night because company is forbidden for saints. After initiation, you have to live in the hut at the entrance of the monastery." See? So let's go on reading this text. Asambhav promised the saint that he would consider every sign from him as a command and carry it out. Satisfied, the saint accepted the cheat as his disciple. Asambhav too began making Deva happy by attending to his every need, but seeing the saint never separated the money back from him, Asambhav thought, "The old man is very crafty and always keeps the bag with him. How can I snatch it from him? Shall I kill him?" As the cheat was at a loss to achieving his goal, a visitor came calling on the sage. The visitor invited Deva to come to his village and perform Bratabandha, the sacred thread ceremony of his son. The saint accepted the invitation and set out for the village, taking Asambhav with him. On the way, the Guru and his disciple had to cross a river. After bathing in the river, they wanted to rest for a while. He took the money bag and pushed it into a quilt he was carrying. Then he told the disciple, "I have to respond to nature's call. I am leaving this quilt of Shiva here. Keep an eye on it." The moment the Guru went out of his sight, Asambhav collected the bag and fled from the place. With great trust in his disciple, Deva decided to join a crowd watching two well-fed goats fight ferociously. As blood was running down their heads, a jackal came there to feast on the blood the two goats were shedding. Deva saw the jackal entering the scene and thought that the jackal would surely die caught between the two warring goats. His surmise came true, and the jackal died gored by the two goats. After the death of the jackal, Deva returned to where he had left the money bag with Asambhav. He found Asambhav missing. The holy quilt was there, but not the money bag. He began wailing, "Oh, trickster! What have you done? I have lost everything in the world." After a vain search for the trickster, the foolish saint returned home unhappily. That is the end of our story. Now, the question is, what is a moral story? That is the question. Another question that we must talk about, that we must discuss, is who is foolish, Deva or Asambhav? So, who is foolish? That is another question. Another question is why jackal? So these questions come to our mind after reading this story. So what is a moral story? First of all, a moral story is something that teaches you, that preaches you or gives you some lesson of some kind in the end. So likewise in this story also you get a lesson, right, in the end. Now the big question is, who is foolish, Deva or Asambhav? Was Deva foolish? Indeed he was a foolish man. Was Asambhav foolish? More than foolish, I think Asambhav was what we call greedy. He was very greedy, and he was crafty also. He was cunning, and he wanted the money so bad that the experienced cheat turned out to be a disciple, a fake disciple at one, and started serving his master. But master, in the end, what he did was he took the money bag and ran away. So that's all he did. Who's foolish? Obviously, Deva is very foolish. Asambhav is greedy. And why jackal? Why not something else? And jackal is more like a distraction here, because jackal, two goats were fighting, a very healthy goat, he-goats, they were fighting, and the jackal comes in between them and gets killed by these two fighting goats, right? And the jackal is a mere distraction because a crowd has been formed around jackal, and Deva loses himself in the happy, cheering crowd. Finally, he realizes that he has lost something, and he starts wailing, "Oh, trickster, what have you done? I have lost everything in the world." But indeed, had he been the enlightened man, he would not have said something as, mundane as that. Now, that is the point. He starts wailing, Deva, in the end, "Oh, trickster, what have you done? I have lost everything in the world." What does he say? He says, "I have lost everything in the world." You see, that money bag was his everything. He was not the enlightened one. He was not the chosen one, not the divine one. He was a greedy monk. That's all. Now the question is, why read moral stories? Now that is the big question we shall be talking about. Why read moral stories? So why should we bother reading about moral stories that preach morality? The answer to that question is very simple. Because why read moral stories? Because they teach us life's lesson. Life's greatest lessons are often taught by moral stories. They also, teach us about truth, something called nobility, oftentimes divinity, and stuffs like that. So if you read moral stories, you would know what is true and what is wrong. People these days do not, get so confused between the right and wrong. So if you grew up reading moral stories, you would certainly know what is right and what is wrong. Also about life's lesson, moral stories, they are oftentimes inspirational. So they are quite inspiring. So if you read a moral story, you get all inspired and you want to do something in your life. And that's the number one reason why we should be reading moral stories. And the number two reason is, moral stories, they do teach us about nobility, what is good and what is bad, what does men and women, what should they do. So these stuffs are taught by moral stories, and because moral stories are written like that, are meant to be like that. There's something called fable. Fable is something that has been told from one generation, that has been passed from one generation to another. So it will go on passing from generation to generation. So these stories in a way help us understand who we are and what we should do, what our duties are and what our obligations really are. That's why we should be reading more often moral stories. Let us now go to the exercise portion. The first question that we have is something called unscrambling the words. And what does unscrambling the words mean? It means that you're going to rearrange the words. The words are in the wrong order and you have to rearrange the words from left. On the left, they're given on the left, and correct them. The words should match the meanings on the right. So we have something called TUH. And what's a TUH? TUH, a small house. Can you reshuffle it? Reshuffle TUH. You can obviously write HUT. Hut means a small house. Pretty easy, right? So let's solve another one. DELF. The answer is ran away. Now you've got to reshuffle DELF. Go backwards, FLED, fled. Fled means ran away. Pretty easy, right? So likewise, there are more words. Let's try some more. There's a word ATCHNS, and the meaning is rob. So can you reshuffle this word and that would match the meaning to rob? You can say SNATCH. Snatch means to rob. And that's another word. It is TFYARC, and the meaning is clever. And I've got to unscramble this word. Try TFYRC. CRA crafty. Very good. Crafty means clever. Pretty easy. Snatch means to rob. Crafty means to clever. All you're doing is you are unscrambling. Let's go to the second question. In the number 2, we have something called fill in the blanks. Now you've got to fill in the blanks in this portion. The first question is, they were lived in a, that's a blank space. We have another question, number B. Some Fav has realized that this life is an blank space. Now that's another question, number C. Some Fav was an blank space cheat. Now can you solve these questions? Alright, I'll give you some time. Try finding the words, right words from the book, then we'll be correcting. By the way, there are 2 more questions to go through fighting. The fully sent return home blank space, so I'm leaving that to you. They're pretty easy. By the way, everything is pretty easy in this section. All you have to do is find the right word. Now try finding the right word. Can you do this? Try number A. Start with number A. They were lived in a what? They were lived in a monastery, right? They were lived in a monastery. Asambhav has realized that life is an illusion. Very good. Asambhav was an experienced cheat. That's the answer. Pretty easy. Let's go to the another portion. Read and answer. Now we come to the portion called read and answer. There are some questions and we shall be solving them. The first question that we have is, where did they live? Now remember, the question is in the past tense, so you've got to write the answer likewise. They were, live would turn into lived in a monastery. They were lived in a monastery, comma, far away from human civilization. Is it civilization or habitation? Okay, the correct word is habitation, right? In a monastery far away from the human habitation lived a saint called Deva. That is what is written in your book. So where did they were live? They were lived, remember the past tense because the question is in past tense, in a monastery far away from human habitation or civilization. Another question, number 2, is how did the saint collect a lot of wealth? And how did he collect a lot of wealth? By selling the clothes, if you remember. By selling the clothes that were given to him as gifts by a lot of devotees. Now devotees used to come there and give them a lot of gifts, mostly clothes, and by selling those clothes they were made a fortune. Okay, we have another question. What was the real plan of Asambhav? So what was the real plan of Asambhav? The real plan was he wanted to get the money bag of Deva. So that was the real plan. He wanted to, in fact, the better word would be still. He wanted to steal the money bag of Deva. That was the real plan of Asambhav. Now there are other questions like, what was Asambhav not allowed to do? He was not allowed to enter the hermitage during the night because the companions were not allowed. Number E, what did Asambhav do to make Deva happy? And started going all around, started following him and stuff like that. Number F, where were Deva and Asambhav going to? To a village where there was some Bhartabandha, ceremony. Another question, how was the jackal killed? Did the saint get the money back? Pretty easy, you can do that yourself. Just mind, to answer following the proper tense. What was? So V2 is here. That's why we answer the question in V2. With this, we have come to end of today's class. Now I am going to give you some homework. And your homework would be pretty easy, this one. Have you ever heard any animal stories? Have you ever heard any animal stories? Did your grandparents or maybe parents tell you such stories? The question is, tell a story that you have heard or read. So I'm modifying the question. This is from Activate Yourself number C. Instead of tell, write a story. So that's your question as a homework. Have you ever heard any animal stories? I know you must have heard the stories of, the jackal, the fox and grapes, of pigs, elephants, birds and stuff like that, animals, birds and all kind of stuff. You're a child, you must have heard stories like that. And did your grandparents or parents tell you such stories? I bet they did. And write a story that you have heard or read. And that's your homework now. You've got to write a story, that's all. With this, we have come to end of today's class. If you have any questions or suggestions regarding this video series, feel free to write us at learning@deerwalk.edu.np. Thank you.